So, do you like my shirt?
Your shirt. Hold on. More barbecue? Is that what that says?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes, more barbecue. Exactly.
Yeah.
I legitimately think barbecue is the secret to world peace that we haven't explored yet.
You know, well, maybe not among like the vegans and the vegetarians. But
we can make vegan and vegetarian barbecue.
as long as we include them, then yeah, then the world peace will be coming.
Absolutely, everyone's welcome. I think it's next to impossible to hurt or yell at someone when you have overeaten. I am dirty, I am gross, I am tired. Things are not even close to slowing down anytime soon. There have been a bunch of super cool things that have been happening, and I can't wait to share them with you, but all in good time. First, I want to start this out by saying this is no political statement. In my country of America, adults can do whatever the hell they want to do. These adults have chosen these life choices, and because of these life choices, certain specific challenges have been presented to them considering their circumstances of being trans and being vocalists. I didn't even really know this was a thing until I had accidentally sent someone into a dysphoric episode and I felt like a giant asshole about it. And it made me think, I don't really see anyone talking about the challenges of people who are having these changes to their voice or having these changes to their physiology, how that would impact you if you are a singer. So I wanted to explore that because I find it extremely interesting. I was not able to include the entirety of these interviews. Total, there was about an hour's worth of time to sift through, and I wanted to keep this digestible. So I would not by any means say that this is a complete representation of either of their stories, but I think it's a really interesting perspective to look into and to understand. And it's a problem that more people than we realize are going through on a daily basis. Now, I'm gonna let these two introduce themselves and do their own splaining.
My name's Allie. I have been in and out of various heavy metal and jazz fusion and all kinds of different bands for years. My main squeeze is my project Flummox. I've been transitioning now for almost 2 years.
My name is Giles Maximilian Welch. I'm a 44-year-old trans man. My day job is that I am a biologist and a chemist. I'm a college professor teaching science at Tennessee State University while I work on my PhD in biology. My experiences and the experiences of your friend are our experiences, and they are not in any way the totality of transness. Things that I have said are true for me may not be true for someone else's experience, and that is an important part of the dialogue.
So I was born and raised here in Murfreesboro, about 40 minutes south of Nashville, and I was raised in a very conservative, very Southern Baptist background. Goes without saying, it being queer was immediately like a big no. If this gives you any sort of inclination of how sheltered I was, a friend of mine in 6th grade showed me Black Sabbath's Iron Man. And the first time, that was literally like the first heavy metal song I'd ever heard. Up until then, like the heaviest thing I'd even ever listened to was probably Switchfoot. Hearing that blew my fucking mind. So when I come home, I was like, Mom and Dad, I heard this amazing band today. They're called Black Sabbath. And my mom lost her mind. But my dad, he was an old rock guy. So like at one point he ended up like kind of getting me a Black Sabbath greatest hits under the table sort of deal.
Music in my family is almost our first language. My father was an opera singer, my mother was a voice teacher, and so music was always a huge part of our lives. Anytime that my family gets together, the first thing that we do, even before we catch up about current events, is trade the new music that we've discovered since the last time we saw each other. We often do that by singing it together. If there's more than 2 of us in a room, you're gonna get music. My mother was far more worried about my decision. It's practically the first thing she ever asked anytime that she would meet us is A, have you been keeping up with your vocalese? And B, you're not smoking, are you? She was definitely far more disturbed when she discovered that I had taken up smoking. It's a self-destructive thing, but it often helped with the dysphoria because it made the voice rougher and deeper. And vocal dysphoria has been a big part of why I decided to chemically transition.
So like I had said in the intro here, when you're doing hormone replacement therapy or taking hormones that are not the hormones that you were born with. Physiological changes will occur, as well as mental and emotional changes. I wouldn't call myself a vocalist in the sense that I'm like a professional one, or that I would even consider myself capable of being a professional one at the skill and amount of time I put into it. But I know enough to know that these physiological changes would definitely impact me, and the emotional and mental side of having to adapt to these things would definitely impact me performing. So I'm gonna let them take it from here and kind of run with it.
If you're AMAB, like I am, you've already gone through the puberty that lowers your voice. Your vocal cords have, and your Adam's apple and all that, it's dropped.
Once those cords are roughened and thickened, it's pretty much impossible to turn them back again using modern technology.
Because we've already gone through that change, we basically have to go through some sort of voice therapy. At least in my experience, it does change your timbre. It does make your voice a little bit loftier, I guess. It definitely creates more of a natural, light, brighter sound than it once did.
Kind of silky.
Yeah.
My original training was as a coloratura soprano because I had a very, very high voice. Part of going on the testosterone, the decision to go ahead and begin that part of medical transition, I had to face the reality that I might never be able to sing again when I was done, because you can't predict what the testosterone is going to do to the voice. It could have ended up that I could no longer carry a tune. I could end up with a terribly raspy sound. What I did discover almost immediately is that it was easier to vocally transition singing the blues rather than trying to sing classical opera, because at the very worst, I might end up sounding like Tom Waits, and that wouldn't be a bad thing.
It's a love-hate relationship with my singing voice, because on one hand, being in the kind of band I'm in, there are certain moments where, as a musician, and as a vocalist, I want to hear very aggressive, harsh, very bassy vocals, and I can still do that, but then there's also the aspect of immediately switching from that to the higher, more femme voice.
For trans men, there is, as I understand it, a medical procedure that you can have done where they basically clip some of the tendons here, and that causes the vocal cords to elongate extraordinarily, and it creates a much deeper speaking voice. But it's totally unpredictable what the result you're going to get is. The common side effects that are recorded would be terribly bad for a singing voice, because you will lose some measure of control. Because once those tendons are gone, clipped, they're clipped. You can't pull them back up again, as it were. So I think that you would have to be suffering from some pretty extreme dysphoria to decide to do that, and it's certainly not anything that I think anyone would recommend someone who is primarily a vocal musician. Yes, it could make me a basso profundo, but it could also make it so that I could never sing again. And given that I'm getting the deeper voice, the more resonant voice that I needed to handle my dysphoria, for me, this is enough.
Depending on what kind of dysphoria you struggle with, it can either be episodic or it can just be subtle. I'm not gonna say that every time I hear myself back on a video or a recording, I my first thought is not usually, oh, that sounds so effeminate. I still do death metal style vocals. I still do very low, almost like Captain Beefheart growly sort of vocals. And, it just whatever suits the song. So when dysphoria comes into play, it's less of a thing going on as far as, since I've been taking HRT and everything, like, I haven't really been as dysphoric, but it definitely still happens frequently. It's definitely something you gotta work on your own.
I am not as familiar in vocal surgeries available for trans women. I know that there's quite a lot of vocal training that can be done.
The one technique that she showed that really stuck out was, if you remember, back when you're like a teenager or whatever, and you're just getting into metal, and you try to do like the growling, but it's like whisper growling. It's like the, like that kind of thing.
Yes.
Apparently,
the only kind of growling that I am good at.
One of the techniques is if you start like the lower whisper growl and go higher, it's like a ha, and then you vocalize once it gets to that higher, and then you just kind of do that over and over again.
Can I try it?
Yeah, of course.
Okay.
Your show.
I don't think it's working for me.
That's right. It's supposed to sound really awkward. I mean, it's not like, one thing that I've also just kind of done on my own time is I'll find bands that have like a female and a male vocalist, or and they're alternating, and sometimes I'll pick one of those parts and follow that and sing along with that, and then next time around I'll pick the other part and go along with that.
I know you'd said you're trained as a bel canto. Do you still use those techniques currently with your voice transitioned?
To an extent, I do. I'm being very, very careful. And the reason for that is that my mother, as a voice teacher, always used to sort of half-jokingly say that her young male students, she would have to sort of say goodbye to them for a little while when their voices started to break. Because some of those techniques, if you are in vocal transition, in that as you are growing, they don't work the way that they used to. And some of them that used to be a healthy way to use your voice during the transition process can actually cause damage to the apparatus. And so at the moment, I'm being extremely careful not to use any of the like super advanced techniques. And some of that also is because the majority of the advanced techniques that I know are all for the very, very upper register. And at the moment, that's where the majority of the breakage occurs. Since the last time we spoke, there's been more development. I've now got some interesting tenor things happening in my head voice that are interesting to explore, but the basement is still all the way down, I would say probably halfway into the bass range. I've got the full baritone range right now. And as breath support gets better, that's going to be even better than it was. The breath support I'm finding is very different. But I don't know if that's a function of the changing of the instrument, if it's supposed to be different, or if I just need to find a teacher again for the first time in 20 years.
Or even just like, who knows what other parts of the physiology are being changed by the HRT.
I have noticed that I have much better results with the timbre of my voice if I assume my father's singing position rather than my mother's. And it has to do with breath support. That resonant tone really needs to have enough support under it to not be reedy, and it breaks less with better breath support. The reason that I started making the recordings when I did is that I felt that it was important that this particular story be told, because I hadn't found anything even among the trans community about trans men and vocal transition. Because some people, the testosterone gives them that incredible deep voice, and some people, it doesn't make that much of a change. It's very much a roll of the dice. I laughingly refer to myself as a deck of Pokemon cards. I have no idea what's going to be in there until we finish opening the package.
Now, specific to Allie's case, Allie was in the band Flummox, and they already had a decent following. They were pretty out there in the public before she transitioned.
It did alienate some of our older fans just because they're used to seeing, if you want, like, you can flash a fucking old picture of me here. Like, I had this fucking beard and this, this wizardly sort of appearance. I did lose some friends. I did lose some fans, I guess, because a lot of people almost thought that I was just being trans as almost like some sort of marketing or promotional gimmick.
Shock value, which I think that'd be a good opportunity to explain a little bit of what Flummox is about.
That's fair, because Flummox, like I said, we, even before all this, like, we've all done a little bit of gender bending. We like do weird, fucked up, crazy shit on stage. I dress like a possum and roll around in garbage. A lot of people did think, oh, this is just another thing, because again, I was still going on stage, 5-6 years ago, wearing a dress and a full fucking beard, and it's just Flummox. We did get a lot of fans because of the fact that I'm trans, and like, it's basically, there's a lot of people I know that just would not have really given a fuck about Flummox beforehand, but if you go onto Spotify, for instance, and you type in Flummox, if you look in our related artists, you'll find Gloss, and you'll find Laura Jane Grace, you know, a bunch of trans artists
who sound so much like you.
Gloss, and I love Gloss. Gloss is amazing, but still totally sounds different from anything we've done. The only similarities is that the bands feature trans women. In metal, like, I was surprised, like, there was quite a few trans women and trans metal and trans men vocalists, and
we're talking already having transitioned.
Yeah. You've got a lot of death metal vocalists that I know, and lot of fucking bass guitar trans women. It's like a stereotype. They transitioned years and years ago, and nobody really knew them back then, so it worked out. Whereas with me, you know, I'd already been doing flummox for 6 years by the time I came out as trans. But it was definitely a lot different than if I had transitioned several years ago and then started a band. You know, like, I probably wouldn't have initially, you know, I wouldn't be saying, oh yeah, you know, like, I wouldn't be putting my transgender identity like as the forefront. You know, it kind of just happens to be like that now since the band's been established, and then I came out, and a lot of people now know.
Now, in Giles' specific case, he actually enlightened me to something that I would not have even considered when it comes to the timing of the tee shot.
The biggest thing that's giving me trouble right now is that the further away I am from my testosterone shot, the more stable my voice is. And I find that taking the testosterone shot, of course, creates that state of second adolescence, and so the cracking is always the worst the day after a shot, and then it gradually gets better. As a performer, I think it would be impossible for me to commit to a vocal performance within 3 days of a shot, simply because I can't guarantee what range my voice is going to be that day. There have been a couple of opportunities where there were a couple of gigs where people invited me to come and be part of what they were doing, and I always had to make sure to schedule my shot sort of strategically so that I would have access to control of my range. And predictable, reliable sound. The voice sounded great though, man, that far from the tee. The end game, of course, with testosterone therapy is that you have gotten to the point where you've gotten the physical changes that you want, and you go to a lower dose or a maintenance dose. And at that point, I think the voice will be stable enough that I'll be able to use it all the time. My vocal range has shifted by 2 full octaves. That means that sometimes, by habit, simply from my ear hears the harmony that I want to pick out, and it's 14 steps out of my range in the ceiling. And it takes me a minute to be like, oh wait, no, we have to, okay, where is it? Oh, there it is. Discovering that I'm gonna have to learn all new harmonies for some things, because now the original melody is in my key where it never was before, and I learned all of those harmonies just so I could sing along in a way that was comfortable with my voice. And now I have to remember how to sing a melody that I've never sung in my life because it was too low.
I was super curious, and we found out a whole bunch of interesting information through this process. At least I did. And if y'all have any questions about it, let me know in the comments below. You can also check out Allie's links. Her links are down there. There might be links for Giles, I'm not sure. I don't think he has anything to promote, but if he does, that shit'll be down there too. And I will see y'all in the next video. Rock on.